I'm going to talk about point of departure, South African political imperatives, forces that are shaping transport in our country, the Gauteng transport planning, governance structures, funding, which is always the nice one to talk about, and then closure. Right, so point of departure, there must be a continuous shift towards public transport. This is a given. So whatever plans we have, this has to happen. It is because of increased congestion, impact on the environment, availability of fossil fuels, and quality of life. Secondly, public transport is for everyone and not just for the poor. This is a message that every time you see somebody from Treasury, shake their hand, say good morning, remember public transport's for everyone. Because it can't just be for the poor, otherwise we're not going to make it work. Public transport consists of different modes, and it has to be a system. And rail must form the backbone of the public transport system. So these are all fundamental points of departure. There must be coordination between transport planning, land use planning, and economic planning. Now it's easy to say, but it's very difficult to do. But if one looks at any country in the world that works, this is the correlation which is there. We have 4 crisis issues in South Africa. We have a legacy of apartheid spatial planning where people live very far away from where they work, it becomes very expensive, very time-consuming trip. Modal integration, especially at modal transfer nodes in Gauteng, the average commuter changes modes 3.7 times per day. The last mile is always the issue. You have to give, remember, any public transport gives you a point-to-point service, but you're looking for a door-to-door service. So what do you do the last mile? We're seeing in the Gautrain now with the Uber flights. If you want to get an Uber from one of our stations, Uber says to you walk 2 blocks. That walk 2 blocks may have cost us 15% of our ridership because the people aren't willing to walk 2 blocks. So that last mile becomes a big issue. And then the role and function of the transport authority. Right, so what is South Africa's political imperatives? Sitting in this room, we all say we're transport professionals, but unfortunately, there's 2 things that we have to do in our country, and if we don't do it, we might as well go home. And those 2 things are fighting poverty and fighting unemployment. We have an unemployment rate of 28%, and there could be long stories whether it should actually be 35%. But as we stand here today, there's 9.6 million South Africans without jobs. 9.6 million. So the president says we're going to create 250,000 jobs. So it'll take 36 years to fill the posts. We have about 300,000 scholars coming to the market every year. So this is an absolute crisis. But what type of jobs will we create for these people who are not working? Do they have the skills to walk into the 4th industrial revolution and start being employed? These challenges will have to be addressed within the forces that are shaping public transport. And the forces, there's 4 things. One thing is globalization. We estimate by 2025, 60% of the world's population will be living in urban areas. So this is densification, urbanization, rapid urbanization, which will give an increased demand for movement of people, goods and services, the emergence of smart cities, and a greater dependency on ICT. So anything you guys have learned and ladies have learned in this room has to change. It has to change. We're living in a world which is continuously changing. The next one is the environment, pollution, and greenhouse gases. There seems little doubt that climate change is one of the most significant threats to the future of humanity. And there's great concern about public transport. The transport industry is, we make 18% of all the greenhouse gases. And if we take into account that the global car fleet is expected to triple by 2050, the emission from transport will be even worse. So we are asked, and Jan Albert showed it in his slides, public transport is actually creating this, actually a pause that you could develop other technologies. We are about 4 times better or less pollutant than the cars. So this is a big issue. The fourth industrial revolution. Everybody talks about it, but just for a moment think, why do we call it a revolution? Remember, a revolution, there are winners and losers. And the winners and losers, you get actually, people are there will become exploited. So the first industrial revolution, 1784, was when mechanization, when they started making factories, and the poor countries were used as labor in those factories. And the guys who, of course, developed the factories, they're the people who made the money. Second industrial revolution, 100 years later, we had a new source of energy, electricity, gas, and oil, and the development of the internal combustion engine. And then, nearly 100 years later, the third industrial revolution, where we had nuclear power, and then we had the development of computers and telecommunication. So, now what you can see about this is the fourth industrial revolution has taken only a few years to be there, and we're living in it. And this is the first time that the revolution is not driven by a source of energy, it's driven by digitalization. It's driven by how do you handle this massive block of data that you're going to get. When I was still young and beautiful, we used to do kinds of models to try and predict ridership and all those things, and you had to develop refunding models. Now you can track every person on their cell phone, where they get on, where they get off. So how do you take this block of data and make it information? And that's going to be the thing. Can I talk about disruptive technologies? Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. It took 102 years for the telephone to be installed in every person's house. Nowadays, disruptive technology takes 19 days to be implemented. 19. So if somebody says Airbnb is now the biggest hotel group in the world. It has 75,000 rooms, and it doesn't own one house, doesn't own one hotel. But Airbnb is running it. Same with Uber, same with the e-hailing systems. So we have to, and this is just showing industrial revolution 1, 2, 3. And these are all the stuff that we talk about, disruptive technologies, 3D printing, all these things that I've got in that ring. So, yeah, I love this photograph. So this is the journey. This is the guy stoking the fire, and that's been replaced by Gautrain. So that's the journey, and that's the jump that we have made. The fourth one is workforce challenges. In a recent study by the World Economic Forum, they predicted that by 2025, robots will handle 52% of the current tasks, almost twice as many as now. Humans will have to revamp their skills to keep pace with this seismic shift. Now remember, we have 28% of our workforce unemployed. They have to come into this new, they can't come and say, we're going to give you sweat labor. They have to start addressing this challenge. It says, the study said a major challenge will be to retrain workers who themselves will be pressed to update skills, especially in areas in creativity, critical thinking, and persuasion. It is calculated by 2042, computers will have a better analytic possibility than the human mind. So 2042, man, I hope I'll be retired by then. That's when we are really in trouble. So they will say, Jack von der is going, here's the computer replacing him. And they identified an overall trend towards lifelong learning and adaptation. And this is something, if you get a degree and you put it in a frame and you nail it against your wall, 5 years from now, take the degree out and throw it in the dust. It means nothing. 5 years. You have to be a continuous learner from now until the day you put your head down. What is interesting here, if you are 12 years old, you have a 70% chance that you will work in a job that hasn't been defined yet. So you will have a job that's not defined. If you're 2 years old, you have a 100% chance that you'll be working in an industry that's not been defined yet. So this is what's going to happen. So you that have children, if your child is 2 years old, you can't even say to your daughter or your son, you're going to work where you're. That industry doesn't exist today. All right, transport planning. You know that we've done 25 integrated transport master plan for Gauteng. And Robert says he has had 5 ministers. I've had 6 premiers and 10 MPs. So, and remember, you have to convince them to do long-term planning. Like I said, Dr. Vardy, who's my boss, he said to me, get the team together and do the 25-year integrated master plan. All right? So this is the growth in population. When we did the study, we thought we would have in 2037 about 18.5 million people. The latest census says we're going to have about 19. As we speak here today, 547 people move to Gauteng from the other provinces per day. Every day, our population goes up by 547. So this is, every time they count us, they'll say, sorry, we undercounted Gauteng. This is our job opportunities, and you can see the bigger the circle, the bigger the jobs. This is the existing one, and you can see that's the future ones. So the jobs are again concentrated, although Gauteng is a small province. All our job opportunities are still around the freeway system. This is our land use plan. As you can see, we have the urban edge. We're trying to keep the developments in that urban edge, and this is 25 years' time, we want to do densification in that block, and that's where rail will come to its full use. So in this study, we said we have to have sustainable transport, we have to reduce travel times, we have to shift the modes. If you don't remember one slide, please just do this one. You have to shift as much as possible from motorized transport to non-motorized transport. You have to then shift as much as possible private road transport to public road transport. And then you have to shift as much as possible road, that's freight and passengers, to rail. Those 3 shifts, the more successful you are, the more successful we will be as a province, the less successful we are, the more we will just fade into insignificance as a province. Technology, we have to use environmental friendly technologies, and we have to use intelligent transport systems. In our study, and this is a really interesting slide, it shows socioeconomic density and the job creations. What I wanted to show you here, if I can find out where the point, those blue lines are metro rail, or the railway lines. Now you can have a look at it and say that the railway lines aren't where the people live. But these railway lines were built 100 years ago, and they were never built for the people. They were freight lines. They were to link the mines and link the farm to the market. So you can do as much as you like with the metro rail system or the rail system we have. It's in the wrong position. It's in the wrong position, and this is existing 2014, this is 2025, and this is 2037. So again, you can see the density of the population is there, the jobs are there, and the metro rail is running all around it. So in our study, we have said that we have an existing rail system, run from Hatfield in the south down to Park in the north. We say that there should be another line which actually runs from Mamelodi in the east Pretoria down to Jablani in Soweto. Then have a railway line running from Lanseria to Randburg into Sandton and then down to Boksburg, and then the airport line. So these are the 4 lines that we say should be there. It's another 150 kilometers of rail track. Why? Standard gauge. And so this is the plan. The plan is to do the first phase from Little Falls to Cosmo, build a depot there, and then come in Randburg into Sandton and build another tunnel tomorrow. So that'll be phase 1. Phase 2 will then be linking Little Falls, Verdipo down to Jablani and Soweto, and the full phases will be to link everything up on the low leaf and that. So this is our plan. We've completed the feasibility, and we will, when we get the go-ahead, we can start start building. Next one is governance structures. The white paper on rail, what Jamie spoke about. The devolution of Metro Rail to a transport authority or a metropolitan municipality, that's ×4, the 4 provinces where there is rail at the moment, in 2 stages. The one is a service level agreement for the payment of subsidies. The idea is to take about 3 years to do that, and then the full asset transfer, the idea is to do about 7 years about that. So the timelines, that's critical when we do it. Government always has a thing to say, you'll only devolve it once you have the capacity. If you haven't the job, you can't create the capacity. So it's a chicken and an egg, and we can dance around the table for a year. Those of you that work for municipalities know about that, about the capacity. We have to create a transport authority. In Gauteng, we will devolve it down to the transport authority because we have 3 metropolitan authorities door, and we have developed the Act, the Gauteng Transport Authority Act. It's been drawn up, it's been approved by our Executive Council. It's now in the process of Gauteng Government legislature. We hope to have it approved and promulgated by the end of this calendar year, and to create the Transport Authority early next year. This is the Transport Authority. It's got quite a complicated structure. It will be an authority that has a CEO who reports to the board, and the board then reports to 3 entities, to Gauteng Executive Council, the Premier's Consultative Forum, and Metropolitan Mayoral Committee. And the task that we will do is coordinate planning, optimize operations, enforcement, contracts and standards, and funding and advocacy. So this is what we hope to set up in the next few months. Funding, we have to make provision for CapEx and OpEx. You know, in Africa, we usually spend money on CapEx and forget about OpEx, and then we run into debt. So that can't work. Remember, in our case, we can only show 3 years. Medium-term expenditure framework of 3 years, so you have to, if we go towards public-private partnerships, you must be able to show the private sector that you have the money, and it becomes a problem around this only 3 years that we see. Contract form, you have to make a call. Are you going to go for the normal quantities, or are you going to go for a PPP type contract? If you go for a PPP type contract, you have to prove 3 things: feasibility, value for money, risk transfer, and affordability. So these are the things that keep you awake at night. If you really want to worry, come and join my team on risks, because that will keep you busy for the rest of your natural life on this earth. Just to show, and I really like this, in the public-private partnership, you have the public sector, you have the private sector, and you have the user. And what each one must bring to the party. Public sector brings in land, legislation, subsidies and guarantees, rights of way, and a long-term vision. And please don't get a consultant to tell you what your long-term vision is. If you don't know yourself where you're going, don't get somebody else to come and tell you to do it. So these things that you do here, you must do it yourself and have the capacity to do it. The private sector will bring in design and build, innovation, operation, maintenance, financing, and access to capital markets. And you know the wet van transfer, the user will pay. Right? So that's the user pay principle. Right? If it works well, let's just look at this. If it works well, what do we get out of it? So we again have the 3 parties. If this thing is successful, the government will get taxes, people mobility, economic development, social functions, and associated benefits. The contractors will get design, long-term design and construction contracts. They get long-term operational contracts. They have a way of servicing their debt. They have incomes and they have profit. But look what happens now. The private sector or the public will get time and cost savings. They'll get environmental protection, and they'll get service quality. So it's really a win-win situation if it works well. Right? We have currently in Gauteng, we have 5 sources of funding. And in the future, we have to add a sixth one, and that is value capture. We have to, in these major transport projects that we do, be able to get some of the money back, the value that you capture. I'm just going to show you the diagram. In the case of Gautrain, we have private equity, private debt, we have provincial borrowing, we have medium-term expenditure framework from the province, and then we have the Division of Revenue Act from national. In closure, I have to show you this. 7 stages of a rail project. You're going to do it. You always start with enthusiasm, promises and programs, disillusionment, and then panic. Then the nice things kick in, hunt for the guilty, punishment of the innocent, and then reward for those that have nothing to do with it.